When I was at the park yesterday, I heard somebody walking by talking about something about how their singing coach was retiring. And when I'm in that very clear state, I get extrapolations even from just being in the moment and whatever is happening in terms of interactions around me. And I was thinking about how singing or voice teachers teach us to create beautiful sound with our voice. So I don't have any training, so I sing in a certain way. But if I was to have a singing coach or a voice coach, singing teacher, I'm sure after a year or two or so, I would probably be able to sing quite well. I'm just guessing. And right now, I can't really even imagine that's possible. It's almost like, what could they really teach me? I have a voice, I speak. What else do I need? And I can imagine they would teach us to stop doing things that constrict the sound. So if we want to sing a high note, we have to sing in a certain way. If we want to sing a low note, we have to sing in a certain way and use different muscles and stop using certain muscles and breathe a certain way to create that beautiful sound. So we can create sound, but to be able to sing, we have to perhaps stop constricting the sound in certain ways. And I think what map consciousness shows us is that our ego, our me, our self-structure constricts our whole organism, and it constricts the universe from flowing through us. Just like we don't really allow the breath to move through us and contract our muscles in the right way to sing most effectively and beautifully. So in the same way, our ego structure is constricting our whole being from being able to do that. So map consciousness is trying to correct this. It's sort of showing our unconstricted self. And if we were able to all of a sudden have an unconstricted voice and sing beautifully, we would still need to know songs and music to actually make it into something meaningful. And so when we first get unconstricted through map consciousness, it's like having access to our most beautiful self and our best self without having any music to go along with. And not that we need a pattern or anything, but it's like being able to create beautiful song. It's like being able to create beautiful sound, but not knowing how to play the tune of the ever-changing moment. So at least with musicians, they can look at a piece of sheet music and they can just play it. Well, the sheet music of the universe is always changing. So we have to be able to really improvise with that. And when we're first unrestricted, we might just think, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and kind of have fun. But then we realize that just because we become unrestricted doesn't mean that we can just create our own music. We still have to create in alignment with the universe, because the universe is that which unrestricted us. So it's freedom, but at the same time, there's still certain laws of the universe, I guess. And I think when we first get in contact with that freedom, we're still partly influenced by the laws of the ego and those structures, even though we're freed from them. It's like we're playing an old song from an old tour of our band, and we didn't realize that we created a new album, and it's time to start playing that. And I'm pretty sure when I watch myself saying this, I'll feel like I missed a few clarifications, and that's sometimes what happens. I have a few minutes to make a video before I'm going out for a little bit, but I wanted to continue. I was thinking about the movie thing I was talking about in terms of the Truman Show delusion, and right now it sort of shows up as people experiencing a certain sense of experiencing reality, and then, say, going to the psych ward and then explaining to a doctor, I feel like I'm being recorded or I'm on TV or something, and then they say, well, this is the Truman Show delusion. But I feel like one day when we have enough vocabulary and enough sense of this changing flux of being human and not feeling so linear in terms of how the ego structure keeps us feeling within a very narrow band of reality all the time, we won't really need to explain the state. We won't need to explain it to ourselves or to other people. We'll just live it. We'll live it as this changing and fluxing being that we are, not thinking that we're this ego, and then if anything goes outside of that, we have to sort of explain it in terms of something that people can understand. And I don't even think we're doing it that way. We're just saying how it feels, and then people are saying, well, it sounds like you think you're on TV or you're in the Truman Show or something. I don't think I explained that very well, but it's just the difference between explaining to oneself that it feels like the Truman Show or something similar, and then attaching to that, which might actually cause it to continue instead of moving on to the next aspect of richness, which could be something totally different. And I was thinking about how our actual life could be like the entertainment industry, meaning it could be as good as how we imagine it is to watch those shows. So when we watch a show, we're very entertained. Well, imagine if we were that entertained, that feeling of how we feel when we're watching our favorite show. If that's how we felt all the time, but by actually living our life, by the fact of living our life, not having to sit down and watch a show to have that feeling. And it seems like our lives have been made mediocre through education and the way we're raised, so then we can be sold entertainment. And when we go into map consciousness, we feel like it's infinitely entertaining. And so it makes sense that sometimes we associate that with some aspects of the entertainment industry, because how we feel is something that we feel when we're just really enjoying something. And we usually equate that to some form of entertainment, because that's where a lot of our joy comes from, is being entertained. But map consciousness connects us with that joy of living, where we don't need entertainment, and it's infinitely entertaining without feeling entertaining. It's just very joyful. And it's no wonder we feel like celebrities in that state, because it just feels so rich, and we maybe imagine that that's how celebrities must feel when they are rich and they can experience a lot of different things because of their wealth and their experience and their fame. But when we're in map consciousness, even though we might not be having a celebrity experience, it probably feels just as good, if not better. So we kind of equate it with that, even though it's not that. So that means we don't need to be celebrities to feel like that, but we can be a celebrity in our own life, in that we can feel that good and joyful and rich. And our vitality has been taken. We've been sold these mediocre lives so we can be sold all this entertainment. And I've talked a few times about dropping experiences and insights and different things that happen and not forming them as a belief. And I was seeing how our thought structure clings onto things and puts them in memory and stores them as knowledge or stores them as belief, which is kind of the same thing. And I was thinking about how insight itself doesn't cling or form beliefs. So our usual way of the mind working forms beliefs. But for example, if I was to form a belief around some of my initial thoughts to myself about whatever in this dialogue, I would have never kept going into continuing to have different insights. It's sort of like when I was told that I had a mental illness 6 years ago. if I would have believed that and held that, I would have never considered thinking anything beyond that. So by forming it as a belief, I can't even see anything beyond it, or think anything beyond it, or wonder about anything beyond it, or if there's something beyond it, I'm going to think about it in terms of mental illness. So if somebody has a so-called Truman Show delusion and ends up in the hospital, they go from thinking, oh, I'm on the Truman Show, or I have people recording me or something, to, after being diagnosed, any experience, whether it's Truman Show-like or Matrix-like or any of the infinite different altered states of consciousness outside the normal state, one will just think, oh, it's my mental illness, oh, it's my mental illness, oh, it's my mental illness, and that blocks any inquiry. So that belief in mental illness blocks any learning outside of that. So it's very limited. So the process of insight doesn't cling at all. So even thinking about dropping beliefs is something that one goes beyond when in the state of insight, because there's no need to drop anything if nothing is clung onto. And I don't even know if clung is a word. Is it clinged or is it clung? I don't know. I don't even know how to use was or were sometimes, and I know a lot of times I say is instead of are. I notice that a bit, but at the same time, I don't really know which one's right, and whatever. So once one's brain goes into the state of insight, then no beliefs form, so there's nothing to drop. And the important thing in that is then the brain is always clear to keep seeing, not seeing in terms of what it saw. But unfortunately, that's what we think is learning, this accumulation process, when we don't understand that when the brain doesn't have the accumulation, there's something else that processes through the brain that's more powerful than a bunch of words and images that we've accumulated. Something else processes and presents possibilities in the brain versus having memory come in, which is very limited. And another thing in terms of the special powers, I wrote down the powers don't need the ego or will, so don't bring that in. So when those powers come in, those powers don't need the ego, and the ego actually warps them in ways that turns them against us. It makes the power turn against the ego, and then it blows up the ego, which is good in ways but not so good in ways because it's very chaotic. So to think that those powers need the ego is a little bit silly.